EMSradio.com.
EMS information for the next generation.
The EMS Garage is a production of EMSradio.com. You can find us on Facebook, just search EMS Garage. You can find us on Twitter at EMS Garage. Email us, emsgarage@gmail.com, or call us, 303-720-6001.
The EMS Garage.
Checking out right now. Okay, I got DG on the phone there. Want to know if you can handle that call as well. Just confirming you are checking the patient. Sale 922 is on scene. Here's buddy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the EMS Garage / EMS World podcast. We're coming to you from EMS World 2018, and they just kick it on.
Nice timing.
How did they do? How did they know? All right, let's do that again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the EMS Garage / EMS World podcast. We're coming to you from EMS World Expo 2018 in Nashville. I'm joined today by Kevin Collopy from Wilmington, North Carolina. And tell me a little bit about what you do there.
Well, I'm the clinical outcomes manager for our critical care transport program.
Okay.
So 3 medical helicopters, 9 mobile ICUs, a NICU team, BLS transport service, and an ALS transport service, all
Nice.
bundled under one big happy family.
Wow.
And I get to do all the risk management, quality assurance, research, protocol development, et cetera, anything clinical that's not just pure operations.
Right.
So we stay a little bit busy. I've got a fantastic team that I work with, and every day we basically get to innovate and try and transform what we're doing in pre-hospital care in our little world, and hopefully share that with some people across the country and around the world if it's something that's applicable.
So you told me something yesterday that you went into work this couple months ago, and you went into work on a Thursday and came home on the following Thursday?
On a Wednesday morning and went home the next Thursday. That was interesting.
So you had to be there because you had a little bit of wind or something? Maybe some water?
We had a small storm that produced a little bit of wind, a little bit of rain. It was kind of interesting. Last year when we were talking at Expo, we talked about how you can plan ahead as a program for the eventuality of a disaster might strike. Well, Wilmington, North Carolina this year was literally ground zero for Florence. The eye of the storm passed over our county. The eye, when it hit shore, was about 70 miles across. So it literally swallowed our entire county. I was in the county's emergency operations center. My boss was at the hospital. We are a hospital-owned program. And then we had managers and directors throughout the entire county all at work. And so we were all underneath the eye of the storm. So we literally were ground zero. And the storm went about 80 miles south of us and 110 miles north of us. It was absolutely enormous. And as most people know, Florence hit shore and she sat. And she sat and did not move for several days. And it was very eye-opening for us. We had to go in and before the storm came, and we shelter everyone in place, which means we bring everyone in, and yes, we're going to have ambulances on the road, but when you're not on shift, you are going to be sheltered in one of our headquarters and one of our stations. We're going to give you food, clothing, somewhere to sleep. Might not be comfortable, they're military cots, but
Right.
It's a disaster zone. And we had to stay for an entire week because Wilmington literally became an island.
Wow. And that was because of all the flooding and everything else that went on around you guys?
Yes, so where we sit, Wilmington is, if you look on a map of North Carolina, we're the little finger that sticks off on the southeast corner into the ocean. We're on a high spot.
Okay.
It's a little sand island or sand spigot that sits off, and Wilmington's about 80 feet above sea level, and over 6 miles trickles to the ocean. If you go north into Pender County or west into Columbus County, you go downhill, and you go down into the swamps for the next several miles. So, and the Cape Fear River drains from all of eastern North Carolina through Wilmington and out into the ocean. So as all the rain fell on top of us and inland, all of our roads flooded. And we, of 4 pathways into Wilmington, they were all at one point cut off.
Wow. So how, logistically, how did you guys make it work? I mean, did you have to bring in other ambulance agencies, or did you just handle everything on your own?
Anyone who tries to get through a disaster without help is tricking themselves. You need to ask for help. What we had to do, and it helped us for the length of the storm, it helped us that we thought Florence was going to hit as a Category 4, because we thought we were going to be utterly destroyed, that this was going to be catastrophic damage. So we started making plans a little over a week ahead of time. Well, we didn't make the plans. We activated the plans we had in place
you guys have
to
been planning
start
for
bringing in
years,
help.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we literally have a policy called Hurricane Response Plan.
Cool.
And we review it and update it every year. And so when we saw this happening, we started making plans to bring in 12,000 gallons of diesel. That's our backup diesel if our primary storm diesel fails. And it actually did during the storm, and we had to go into our storms, into our reserves. Well, it's not that it failed, it's if a little bit of water gets in a fuel pump, you now can't use that reserve. And so we started bringing in that extra fuel. We brought in extra food to be able to take care of people for a week, thinking if this hits as a 4, no one's going to be able to get in to help us because there's going to be so much damage because this is such a big storm. Well, it ended up hitting as a strong Category 1 and then sat for 36 hours, which really produced the same level of damage. It just took longer for the damage to occur. So we brought in fuel, we brought in food, we had to pre-stage resources, and what was really interesting, because the entire eastern half of North Carolina was trying to do the same thing, it was a balance of, do you deploy those resources into the disaster zone ahead of time, knowing we're going to get cut off, but now you risk that those resources being damaged by the storm itself. And so we had to very selectively choose what do we bring in. So we had ambulance strike teams deployed ready to come help us just outside of the storm range. And we had the military ambulances that are designed for high water actually in during the storm helping us out. And then as soon as the storm started to pass, or well, the storm wasn't really over, but the winds died down enough, we brought in the strike teams before the flooding. If you ever watch kind of ice melt, you can kind of see that water trickling across. So we saw all the rain falling, so we knew the flooding was coming. We had to move before the flooding actually hit. When the interstate closed, it closed for 5 days.
Wow. So what were your EMS calls like? Did you have more EMS calls, or was it the same amount? I mean, did a lot of people leave, so it really didn't impact you a lot?
So a lot of people left, and we were hoping enough left that the volume wouldn't spike. And unfortunately, not enough people left, and you had an incredible amount of calls. You would think that in a disaster, most of your calls are for trauma, and there's certainly a lot of that. People getting hurt. We ended up writing an article, you guys can probably find it online, on another EMS media program on a case where we had, during the eye of the storm, a very large oak tree about as wide across as this table fall and crush the back of a house. And we had to deploy. We were all in shutdown, meaning normally during that time we do not respond to any 911 calls. And because of the location, because we heard there were children trapped, they deployed a quick response vehicle with 2 special operations paramedics, the fire department and police, and we ended up spending 5-6 hours on scene trying to extricate everyone.
Wow.
So you certainly had some stories like that. But honestly, what we found is a lot of the calls for help were, I stayed at home and even though I was told to get 7 days of medication, only had 5 days, and now I don't have my blood pressure meds, or I don't have my dialysis, heart failure related medicines, my renal failure related meds, or power's now been out for 5 days. They didn't have enough fuel for their generator, and they're on oxygen at home, and they're going to run out of oxygen. So we really had to provide a lot of long-term care. My BLS teams were incredibly busy providing some of the home health management, long-term care management, care planning for those people. And we actually used ambulances to run meds from our hospital pharmacy home to keep those people out of the hospital.
Smart. Well, and I think, and really that's what you want. Unfortunately, you'd hope people would actually take heed and do what they're told, but they won't. And I think that's interesting too, to say we'll bring you the resources and manage you at home. I think that's great.
And you had to. Our emergency departments were completely overwhelmed during the storm. Not in a we couldn't manage it way. We anticipated it. We closed 2 of our freestanding emergency departments in anticipation of it being a Category 4. So we really had our trauma center left. So they were the catch-all. And we were trying to decompress them ahead of time, but then you discharge someone, it's the middle of the storm, even though you've discharged them from the hospital, you aren't sending them home. So we had to keep a list of people to be able to leave the hospital, and we don't know if they can go somewhere. We don't know if their home is okay or if we need to send them to a shelter. And then we had many what we called medically fragile patients. So elderly patients, multiple comorbidities, they don't need to be in the hospital right now, but we got to keep an eye on them because if they don't manage their medicines right, they'll end up in the hospital.
Right.
And all of the shelters are wonderful. They've got nursing staff at a lot of them, but they have 400 people at a shelter, 500 people at a shelter. They're not ready to manage 50 medically fragile people. And we used our community paramedics to help with them. We used our BLS staff to help. I used some of my critical care transport nurses to help manage some of those patients, to just keep them where they are so we can keep them comfortable, keep them managed appropriately, but outside of the hospital.
So when you, did you guys empty the hospital before the storm? Were you able to move them out?
We moved a lot of patients out. We didn't close the hospital at any point. We were never closing.
But get all the patients that you could out so that you,
yes,
you could stack in.
What became interesting is we have a plan in place for that. We've exercised or drilled on that plan before and had exercises. But the storm was so large, we weren't the only hospital trying to move all of our patients. So the entire state of North Carolina had an emergency management system that every hospital that was moving patients, we could give a list of 10 people and they would call back and say, here's where they're going. You figure out how to get them there. And that's where my critical care transport team came into place, is to help move patients. And we had to wait, though, because there were 19 other hospitals doing the same thing.
Wow.
And normally we would send people home. We did discharge a lot of patients, but a lot of our skilled nursing facilities were evacuating too, anticipating long-term power outages, closures. And so we were moving an entire skilled nursing facility 8 hours away because it was just the only place we could move them all.
Wow.
And we had to not just help move the patients, but we actually took medical staff with them too. So an entire SNF, we took 3 of their nurses, 18 other patients, and moved them across the state. And then later on, we had to re-evacuate them and bring them back into our system.
Is that de-evacuation?
Revac, devac. I'm not sure what the technical word is. But we found you had to have a plan for that as an EMS system because people are going to ask for help. The skilled nursing facilities with whom you work are going to need help for that because they probably don't have an evacuation and a re-evacuation plan. They're going to lean heavily, whether it's a private ambulance service or the public ambulance services, they're going to need your help.
Do you guys have one of those mega bus mover things, or did you just do it all with just regular ambulance?
We do. We have one in our county. Every county around us, or most counties around us have one, and they were all being used. And then to evacuate a lot of the patients, that's really where we relied on a lot of state help. So we had strike teams come in from 6 hours away across the state of North Carolina, and they would bring in 5 ambulances and evacuate an entire skilled nursing facility.
Wow.
On a normal day, could my staff support that? Absolutely. But when you look at the scope of what they're trying to do, that's where you have to be humble and say, yeah, we've got 80 ambulances. We need help. Yeah. We need your help because if we're going to try and do this all alone, we're going to fail, which means the patients will fail. And what's great in a disaster is everyone's happy to help. People are chomping at the bit to come in and try and lend a hand.
Right. Well, Kevin, it sounds like you guys did a great job. Everything I've heard. How is the area now? Is there still a lot of recovery going on? Is there? I'm assuming there's going to be a ton of buildings still, but what are some of the things that are, as far as not only a system but the area?
So as a system, New Hanover Regional EMS, AirLink, Vitalink, Critical Care Transport, we're back to operations normal. We were very lucky. Some of our buildings did sustain some damage. They were able to be mitigated right away, and we're back in all of our buildings. We're building a new headquarters, and that building sustained some damage, but fortunately we're not in there yet. Right. So from a system, we were back to normal probably about 10 days afterwards. It took some time because we had guys who stayed at work for 8-9 days. We had people who couldn't go home. Mm-hmm. Within my team, I had 5 staff members whose homes were permanently destroyed by water.
Wow.
So they're in temporary housing, whether they've rented a condominium, they're with family, they're with someone else. As a hospital system, we've had 50 employees who completely lost their homes. Wow. And so there's a lot of recovery still ongoing. As a community, if you drive down the main streets, you're going to see that the roads are clear. They all look okay. You'll see some brush on the side. But if you go into the subdivisions, you go into the smaller communities, you'll see how much catastrophic damage there really is. How many homes are still sitting piled outside because they had to pull everything out because of water damage, and it's waiting for facilities to come be able to pick everything up, clean it, start mold mitigation. The county just to the north of us, Pender County, had something like 1,700 air medical or air evacuations with the Coast Guard and the military during the event. They evacuated over 3,000 people who got stranded.
Wow.
and they were significantly damaged. So if you go into the counties around us that are much more rural, their impacts have been a lot worse because they sit so low. The rivers crested a couple weeks after the storm and caused even more flooding. And it's funny, we kind of talked about it yesterday. Once the storm passed, the news left.
Right,
the Weather
exactly.
Channel,
That's
CNN,
yeah,
they,
exactly.
they were there during the storm. They were walking through the flooding. They were telling all of us about how horrible it was. And we were like, yeah, we know, we're here. And afterwards, 2 days after the storm, there was very little talk about it. They were on to the next thing that's happening in the news and is popular. And we're all going, you know, we're still in recovery mode. We are still very much in, this is an ongoing emergency a week later, 10 days later. And so you never hear anything about it. And we're going to be measuring recovery in years.
Right.
That is the reality of it. And, you know, I have team members who won't be back in their homes till this time next year if they're lucky.
Oh.
Because, yeah, you know, it seems like it's just a house. You can rebuild a house.
Yeah.
But they're one of thousands of homes that need to be
there's
rebuilt.
only so many resources, right, to come in and build that. So I'm imagining, you know, people coming in but even everywhere in the United States right now, building's crazy. So just finding people to do those jobs is
and
hard.
do it well.
Yeah.
There was a news article last night on our local news that several of the FEMA trailers have arrived for people for temporary housing. The electricians that were contracted by FEMA didn't check with the state laws and the state codes on electrical power and installed the electricity wrong, so none of those trailers can be used for another 2 weeks because they've got to get someone back in to fix all the code violations. And it's not that, you know, it's easy to say, and a news somewhere will probably catch on and go, well, they screwed it up, they weren't following the rules. It's put them in their shoes. They were contracted and they're trying to get this done as quick as they can because they know there's people in shelters. They know they're in hotels. They're waiting for the opportunity to get into that trailer.
Right.
And those guys are doing the best they can, just like all of our providers. They're going to do the best they can for the situation they're in, and someone probably didn't give them those codes, give them that information. And it's a small hiccup, but amplify that now by 30 counties that are doing the same thing, and it takes a while for recovery to occur.
Well, you almost have to wonder why, you know, why you can't be proactive with that and say, hey, you know, our code people are on, you know, they're going to help deploy or, you know, we'll suspend some of the code because, you know, I get it. I mean, most electricians are going to do things right. I mean, they're not going to, you know, you're not going to see a spliced wire open or something, but I guess, you know, you have to almost look at that, and it's a learning opportunity for sure for the state probably to say, we could have done this differently.
And there's lots of we could have done it differently.
Right.
And I think it's important to look at them just that way of, here's some things we could have done better, we could have done differently. That doesn't mean anyone did a bad job.
Right.
People did great, amazing work throughout Florence, throughout the response, throughout the recovery, and they're continuing to do amazing work. That doesn't mean there aren't opportunities for improvement. You know, I've been at my program for 8 years. My boss has been there for 10 years. One of the other managers has been there for 15 years. This was all of our first hurricanes that lasted this long. Our county emergency manager, it was his first hurricane that lasted this long. No one's done that before. No one's had a hurricane that lasts a week. Like, you just don't expect that. So there's going to be opportunities, and you want to learn from it without armchair quarterbacking.
Right. Well, and I think as you build your new plan and as you sit back and after action, I think there's going to be some cool things. So, Kevin, how can people get a hold of you, and maybe they want to learn some more about what you guys learned? How can they find you?
Easy to get a hold of me. I'm on Twitter at KT Collopy, KTCOLLOPY. I'm on LinkedIn /in/KT Collopy, same handle. And then my email address is kevin.collopy@nhrmc.org.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing what had to be. I mean, most people would probably call that a once in a career event. Hopefully.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Although storms continue to happen,
I know.
I can see how people who experience it become more involved in emergency and disaster management, and it's something that you really need to continue to learn about. And I think there's a real place for paramedics to do a better job preparing themselves for it. You'll never be truly prepared, but you want to look at how I can be more prepared.
Right. Great job. Thank you, guys. And you can learn more about all of these great things right here on this channel. I'm Chris Montera for the EMS Garage and EMS World Podcast smash up here at EMS World Expo 2018 in Nashville. Watch this channel for more great content.